Hey guys, today's avoiding pitfalls lesson is all about dialing in your mix. And I've given you a number of tips in the training so far, but I just want to kind of give you like a quick start guide just to kind of recap some important things and leave you with enough to ensure that you don't get hung up on any of the homework today. So these are the things that I think are going to be the most helpful for you. First off, as always, you're going to be referencing your reference track to kind of compare your mixes. But when you do that, you want to make sure that the reference track is turned down around 10 to 15 dB, because we're not going for loudness here. What we're going for is a quality mix. You can worry about loudness when it comes to the mastering phase, which you'll send off to a mastering engineer to get it properly loud. But your job is to give the best mix that you can. Also, double check in each of your tracks and make sure that you've gotten rid of anything below 120 hertz on any sound that's not a kick or a bass or I guess an occasional deep percussion sound. But even those sounds you might want to cut off below 80 hertz or something like that. By making space in your mix in that low frequency, it's just going to make your whole mix sound fatter and punchier overall. Next, don't forget to pan your parts properly. And when I say properly, that's a relative term. It's what feels right to you. Especially if you got two parts that kind of conflict a little bit, or if you've got two layers of, let's say, a hi-hat or something like that. Just moving each one just a little bit is going to bring clarity to both parts. The one thing that you want to try to avoid, though, is over panning, doing too wide of panning effects, especially like stereo effects where panning goes back and forth, like a ping pong delay or something like that. This is because in clubs, most of the sound systems are in mono. So if you've got a panning delay or something like that, oftentimes that can sound pretty weird in the club. So pan as you will, but just kind of scale it back a little bit on the extreme left and the extreme right, and I think you'll be in great shape. Also, to keep your mix clean and combat kind of conflicting parts or conflicting frequencies of two parts, make sure to implement my sidechain compression trick where you can sidechain one track to another, and that way the most important part is always going to be up front and the other part will be pushed down when the other part comes in. For example, with a band, this would be like every time a vocalist comes in, it kind of pushes down the guitar in those frequencies or something like that. And because the voice is taking up those frequencies, you're not really noticing a loss. It's just giving the overall song more clarity. Lastly, when you're putting the finishing touches on your mix and you're trying to dial in the right volume for each sound, I want to leave you with two things to keep in mind. One, when mixing a part, that part that you're mixing, all your attention is on that one part, which means that your attention's not on the mix as a whole. So oftentimes, when you think a sound is just right, when you think that sound is loud enough, it's usually too loud. And what you might want to consider is once you feel like you've got it loud enough in the mix, you might want to consider backing the volume off about 10 or 15%. And usually that's going to put it in a better place in your mix. Because otherwise what can happen is if you're focusing on every part that you're mixing one at a time, it's always the last thing you mix that is the loudest. And the first thing you mix is the thing that gets buried. Another good tip when mixing as well is as you're mixing a certain part, listen to every other sound except for the part you're mixing. It'll give you a more accurate gauge on how everything else in your mix is being affected. So that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. You've come a long way. You should be really proud of yourself. And I can't wait to hear your results. We're getting really close now. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.